Hi, Ma. How are you doing?
Wonderful. I mean, talking of wellness, I think I'm well.
It's been 2 years that more than 2 years that we've been after the pandemic. And I'm sure a lot of people here, it's their first time to actually have a face to face discussion or attending an event like this face to face. Is it? It's, how would I put it into words? It's refreshing, right? To be again with your colleagues. Now, our topic is about building organizational resilience, wellness over work. Now, Maha, tell me, why is it important that organizations build resilience? Because most of the time, when we say organizational resilience, most companies focus on a lot of things, and this would be more on cybersecurity, more on making sure that they upgrade their technology, making sure that the stakeholders, the investors are happy, that the company is profitable even in the face of different challenges. Why is it important to be resilient, especially in times like this?
No, absolutely. And that's such a powerful question because it all starts with the why, isn't it?
Yes.
But before I answer that, I must first acknowledge the first point you made. It's so wonderful, actually, to meet so many of the fraternity in person. Meet some old friends, and it was wonderful to bump into some and actually, build some new connections, including with you, Darwin. It was so wonderful to meet someone from the Philippines, who is a rock star in Philippines, I'm told. So absolutely wonderful
Thank
to
you.
be here and wonderful to, have the opportunity to meet everyone. So why resilience? I think the answer is very simple because resilience is only the resilient thrive, And for organizations to succeed, being able to adapt to anything that comes and hits the organization and then not just survive it, but to succeed and thrive is so important. Now that's true not only for organizations, but also for people. And perhaps that's where our topic comes in. And my personal belief is, Darwin, that well-being is pretty much like a foundation. So when we build a building, we put a foundation and then you can construct anything on top.
Agree.
So for our life and also for our work and also for our businesses, it's so important to kind of have that foundation right so that then we can grow and thrive. That's what I was thinking, but what was on your mind? I'm curious to get your thoughts too.
Well, I would agree that building a foundation to ensure that the business would still grow even at the face of challenges, especially what we've had over the past years. But I think that most companies forget one important thing, and these are their employees. What most companies would say would be their most important asset. Are we forgetting our most important asset, Maha, in terms of building resilience?
So I would think I come from a very blessed situation, and I'm going to take the liberty of sharing examples from my organization. So Mondelez, I used to be in the India business till around a year ago, and then transitioned into the Southeast Asia role. So I would say very blessed that people are at the heart, and this is not just a great statement, but of how we've not only built resilience, but also put people at the heart of how to grow, and that takes a few building blocks. The first building block is really ensuring that there is listening, and employee listening is really the first step before you can really put any other step forward. So employee ongoing listening, ongoing conversations to not just define what we are putting in place from a people perspective, but also to keep refining and adapting. And therefore, the importance of flexibility and agility. And I know we're talking about that later in the evening today. So flexibility, listening, and adapting. I think organizations that have succeeded are organizations that have really realized that this is not a slogan to put up on the walls, but absolutely something that employees have to experience, because one of the very important things that we observe with talent today, and I don't know if that resonates with you, Darwin, is that talent makes choices, and talent decides how much they want to work, where they want to work, do they want to work in two places or one, and why should they choose you? And therefore, whatever you put in place has to be attractive and differentiated while also enabling, because someone who is fundamentally not feeling well cannot actually go and deliver business for you. Leave aside putting in discretionary effort, so on and so forth.
You've already mentioned a lot of things that will be part of our discussion, but let me just take back step and let's discuss employee resilience. How would we define it, and what's the importance of employee resilience to businesses? Because I know for a fact that over the past few years, companies have already been investing for the wellness of their employees. But it was during the pandemic that there were a lot of realizations, right? So let's define first what is employee resilience and why is it important and impacting to organizations.
No, I would think so, and I think what the pandemic got to the fore actually was, I think before I get to how organizations realized it, I would say people realized what they really wanted in life. A lot of times people had the time to step back and say, hey, what am I really doing? And therefore, purpose became so important. I think during the pandemic, when a lot of us, were locked down in our homes, having the time to really say, hey, what really matters to me in my life? Am I using my time well? And seeing friends, family just pass, and realizing that life is so limited and so fragile, made so many people make choices. And organizations that were listening actually caught that trend very quickly. And then what I've seen is maybe 4 or 5 things. One is organizations encouraging people to see how can you realize your purpose in the workplace. And I think having purpose workshops is one of the things that we do a lot in Mondelez. Secondly, resilience is something that can be not just innate, but actually cultivated. So how might we really normalize conversations on what are we really struggling with? How might we normalize struggles which may be something really small, like I'm struggling with managing personal life and the fact that I have to cook because I'm in the middle of a lockdown. I live in small spaces with 3 of my family members all working. How do I enable that as an organization? And equally, how do I normalize conversations on physical, emotional, and connectional well-being? So at Mondelez, we have something called the Right You, Darwin. And Right You says we're going to enable physical well-being of our colleagues, emotional well-being of our colleagues, as well as connections. And how might we enable connections irrespective of how and where we work? And the leaders play such an important role. So we make it a point as the leaders of Southeast Asia to actually call out our own vulnerabilities so that employees do not feel awed about coming and talking about their struggles and their challenges. And we understand that we are all human, and in that sense, putting in place formal and informal mechanisms wherein people feel the connection and a safe space where they could actually build their inner strength is something that we are very, very mindful of.
Agree. So, Maha, you've actually said a lot of things that, let me just digest it. First is that employee resilience would basically, as you mentioned earlier, would be how employees cope with stress, how employees cope with the different problems that he or she is facing on a day-to-day basis at work and also in his or her own lives.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that leadership, number one, leadership plays a very important role for employees to be able to adopt a culture of resilience. And I would actually agree because we all know that employees would, as we call it, mirror how leaders are. If leaders are able to be open enough If leaders are able to share that stress, anxiety is actually happening to them, then employees will be more open to actually agree that yes, this is actually happening to us and it's actually affecting the work. And what can we do? What can the company do to help us, right?
No, and that's a great point. And I really like one thing that you just said, Darwin, which is about, there is a self that employees get to work. And then there is, all of us play so many roles, and realizing that we can get our whole selves to work, the fact that we can literally say, hey, I'm living alone, I have a plumber coming and I need to go, or I literally cannot join this meeting because, I literally have a baby, who's crying right now and I need to attend to the baby, became so normal. So there was a time wherein, I think as HR professionals, we were wondering how to engage. How do we really encourage resilience, And we realized it is so segmented. It's so different. Some people love online connections. Some people get burnt out if we get them into too many meetings. So providing flexibility became so important, And equally, providing platforms where people can find their own solutions and helping, between the leadership of the organization and the frontline colleague in a factory, there are multiple people leaders that we have in the enterprise. And building the capability of leaders at all levels to be able to listen, to be able to be there for their teams as enablers, and we actually literally had workshops, and the program was called Flex Able. So it's a play on the word flexible, but helping our leaders build the ability to actually engage and inspire teams who may be dispersed across locations and going through their own challenges, was a very big enabler for us.
Agree. So earlier we mentioned leadership. Second would be training your frontline leaders and department heads to be able to understand the issues, problems, and concerns of their team members and employees. Being able to build that capability is very important.
Absolutely.
Now, would you say that also building a capability where we use technology to cultivate wellness and resilience?
No, absolutely. And I can say that again from the current role, right? When you look at Southeast Asia, it's 6 countries, and with very different laws, very different cultures, and very different, what would work in one place may not work in another. So if there was no technology, there was no chance that we would ever know what is relevant, what's working, what's not. And continue to adapt. So technology is starting with simple ongoing listening platforms, technologies that help us build connections. And we also have a tie-up with Magellan worldwide, where employees can dial into a helpline and get access to psychologists, and get into a conversation in a very safe way with full anonymity, and get into hour-long and as many times you want conversations that can help you really reflect and think about life. Are some of the things or some of the ways, at least I have seen technology come in. I'm curious in Philippines, Darwin, does that resonate with what you've uniquely seen in Philippines?
Definitely,
or any different
Maha.
trends?
You know what? Over the past few years in the Philippines, let's say, and this is me being honest, 5 to 10 years ago, when an employee would say, I am stressed out, I'm having anxiety at work, it's a taboo. It's a no-no, because basically, if you say that, you should be mature enough to resolve your own issues. Most of the time, your manager will tell you have to resolve your own issues. You have to keep on smiling. You have to make sure that you leave your problems outside work, right? Those are the things that's normal. But right now, companies are realizing that it's important to invest in technology to support employees in their struggle. And let me just share to you that a lot of companies right now, especially during the pandemic, are investing millions of pesos partnering with vendors, similar to what you've had in your organization, where they partner with organizations to have a toll-free hotline that any employees can call, and they can talk to any life coach, psychiatrist, psychologist, or they can also set up meetings with psychiatrists and doctors. They can also have an opportunity to have a 24/7 chat. In my own company where I belong, in Inspiro, we've actually invested a lot to make sure that this is in place. So yes, technology to ensure resilience in the workplace, addressing employee needs is important.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the one very important build that I would perhaps have is technology also helps us check if it's working, because very often, because we've put in an investment or we made a big policy, I think one of the biggest things as HR professionals that we can learn is really agility, to realize that a lot of our policies and a lot of our frameworks cannot be cast in stone anymore. It cannot be that, all of us sat and decided, so now this has to last for the next 3 years, because if it doesn't work, we got to adapt, and one of the best ways that technology is enabling us is telling us where we need to adapt.
Agree.
And I must compliment, and I know there are a lot of startups who have got their stalls here today, but I must compliment how the startup ecosystem came to partner all of us, as HR professionals, as we went through, and as we going through. I don't want to just say it was just because of the COVID and the pandemic. As we continue to evolve, to adapt to the changing needs of employees and colleagues, the startup ecosystem and the tech companies have played such a wonderful role, Darwin, in terms of helping us adapt, helping us listen, and as well as helping us kind of stay agile,
Agreed.
even stay connected, not just with our teams, but with our peer networks, so that we can together learn and grow. And that's really been so wonderful. A big shout out to literally all tech firms that have been enabling that.
100% agree. And I think that for technology to be able to fully be successful, a lot of organizations, of course, will need data, right? And vendor partners who specializes in this kind of things would be able to produce data, analytics that leaders of the organization can use. Which sector of my teams are having anxiety or having stress at work? Which particular department, which particular leadership, which particular site? Those are the things that is important
Great
for
point.
us. And being able to know the data, the demographics of all these would enable us to adopt, to be agile, and change whatever policies and processes or programs that we have, because we have something to base it on. Data is very important in making sure that programs are successful.
That is such a strong and great point, Darwin, because data and insight that comes from data can be so rich in informing people's strategy. And I think that is such a powerful point you made. I also feel sometimes as HR professionals, when we talk about business resilience, are we over-indexing this bit on well-being? So I was a little taken wherein the subject said wellness over work, And I do want to kind of maybe make a moment, and say, look, firstly, wellness enables not just work, it enables life, So even if you're super successful, there's so many super successful people who are not able to enjoy, the benefits of their success. So that's one. Secondly, there's so much more to organizational resilience than people resilience.
Correct.
And while this is a People Matters conference, I do want to also call out, let's not lose focus of things like, is the organization clued in on what is happening to the industry? And therefore, are we listening to what the consumer is saying? And again, technology helps us there, isn't it? And linked to that, are we investing in future forward capabilities? Have we got the right capabilities that will take our organization from where we are today to the next league, even as the world around us is changing? And investing in those capabilities is perhaps another big thing that as leaders we could kind of do to ensure business and organizational resilience? What do you think?
Yes, of course. And aside from that, I know that we've been having this side chat earlier. You mentioned that you were based in India, now you're now based in Singapore. Related to our topic, do you think that governments are now seeing the importance of ensuring that the labor force would have the support in terms of mental wellness or mental health? Are we seeing that? Have you seen that over the past 3 years? Have you seen that in India, or have you? Is this being done in Singapore? Any other ASEAN countries?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to know about Philippines from you, but I think what I pick definitely in India and also in many of our Southeast Asian markets is not just governments. I do see governments encouraging, including, looking at minimum wage. Is this the right minimum wage? Of course, it puts a pressure on, the P&L, and the companies have to then find other agile ways to kind of continue to thrive and grow. But the other interesting thing that I observe is, all of us as citizens, there are people that we admire and role model. Within the organization, it's typically leadership. Outside of the organization, it could be big politicians, and very often it's actors and actresses, singers. And I mean, one of my favorite examples from my past role in my past country, which is, well, India, we had two big actors and actresses who came out saying, I went through severe depression and today I'm very successful, but I'm grateful to my mother, who actually encouraged me to talk about it and find solutions. So having role models express that vulnerability is so important, and that makes it normal. And that also, especially on mental well-being, I do feel that, to your point earlier, Darwin, that it used to be taboo. I also have seen cases where people just say, oh, are you feeling sad every day? Just put on a smile and go out, But if you're having severe fever, no one says, oh, have some cold water and go out, So realizing that some of these things could be a little bit more serious has become tantamount today. And governments, organizations, educational institutions, as well as role models in different strata of society perhaps are playing a part in enabling us to build, firstly, internal resilience and then organizational resilience. Anything unique from Philippines that you could share?
Well, I actually like what you said, that social influencers play a big part in modeling
Absolutely.
the mental health of most people, especially the young generation. But going back to governments realizing the importance of mental health, mental well-being. In the Philippines, it was year 2018 where the Mental Health Act was actually established, years before the pandemic. But during that time, the reason why the government put that in place is because they acknowledge that mental wellness is important to the workforce. But basically from 2018 up to 2020, it was just a compliance for most companies. Okay, we should have a mental health workshop at least once every quarter. We should be able to have programs, this and this and this. But it was during the pandemic that companies realized that the importance of government support in making sure that this would be successful.
What a great point.
Now, we've discussed a lot of things. We've discussed about leadership, we've discussed about technology, we've discussed about frontline leaders, department heads being able to empathize and fully equipped to address the problems and issues of their employees. We've discussed about how technology is important. We've discussed about how data and the insights that we get from data is also important for us to be able to process and create policies and programs. Now, how about the importance of making sure that employees are trained in a way that they're able to resolve their own personal issues. I think it's important that and this I'm wearing my HR hat. I mean, imagine if you have 10,000 employees and 50% of those employees would say that I am having anxiety at work and whatever programs we have is not working. So I think it's important that not only to empower our leaders, our frontline leaders, department heads, but also to focus on these employees and have regular discussions, regular touch base, normalize the discussions on how you can be a better person in handling your own personal challenges or life difficulties,
That
right?
is such a powerful point. And, I think there is a yin and a yang to that point. One of the things that I keep telling, in all our town halls, is individually, it's very important for us to know what gives me energy and what sucks my energy, and I'm using light language as I speak, So some things really instill energy in us and something really drain our energy. Knowing that, firstly, being aware as to where am I on my energy curve, and knowing that when I go through those drain moments, where do I need to go? Personally, for me, it is music. There are specific types of music which can pump my energy up and I can be, back. Or there could be one or two friends who I know I can call. So knowing who can get your energy back is such a life skill, and building that awareness and getting people to anchor on purpose, because when we're doing things which are very close to our purpose, typically you have a sense of flow, and you're generally happy. And secondly, knowing what gives you energy and what takes your energy away is a very simple trick for so many of us to learn to manage and really keep our own resilience going. Having said that, I want to make sure that the yin-yang version of it, leaders should not completely absolve themselves by saying, hey, you should be able to manage your own, So balancing that with saying your responsibility, but I'm there for you, is such an important balance, that we need to strike as organizations.
That's accountability. That's a topic a while ago.
Absolutely.
Well, you know what? You've just reminded me of a story wherein I know that this particular forwarding company, and they're competing basically over the past years. They're just mediocre. They're not able to compete with the big forwarding companies. Then what the supervisor realized is that at the warehouse, it's so silent. Everyone is just working. I mean, lifting boxes, putting it in the right place, putting it at trucks and whatnot. And it's routinary. And you know what? What he did? He played music. He played lively music to be able, and that lively music was able to inspire people to work double time.
Beautiful.
And be more productive. And this is something that, again, if we have to think out of the box as leaders, what really inspires our people and what really helps our people resolve their own issues.
And in that, the essence that I'm picking from what you said, Darwin, is, so we discussed two things already. One is there is personal accountability of how do I find my own ways of staying resilient. There is a leader accountability on how to normalize and create a safe space. But then there is also empowerment.
Empowerment.
How might I ensure that leaders in any location, in any shop floor, in any site or city where we operate, can do those little things that can kind of create that space? In your example, the leader could figure that this place looks too dull and
So
a little
dull,
bit of
gloomy.
music the person hopefully did not have to go and get 20 levels of approval to just make that change,
Correct.
you know. And that can make a hell of a difference in terms of how we really embed resilience into organizations.
Agree.
What a lovely example.
Maha, it's already 12:30, and for us to be able to give time to our audience to ask questions, let's just wrap things up.
Okay.
We were discussing about building organizational resilience, wellness over work, the importance of it to employees. Why do you think, as last words, why do you think, and this is for everyone, I hope that we would have an aha moment after this. Why is it important that employees be the first thing to think of by leaders when we're building resilience in our organization?
So is that to me or is that to the
For
audience?
you first.
Well, I would say the employees are the first point to the consumer.
Correct.
Very often, the employee base is a microcosm of the consumers that we are serving. So, in so many ways, you know, and that's also why we keep saying diversity is important, right? Employees, firstly, are the ones who are making the business happen, and that's the step one. Two, they are a mini version of the consumers that you're serving. So, naturally, listening is only useful, you know, as we continue to build org resilience. So that's what I was thinking. What do you think?
I definitely agree. And for all companies, it's important, yes, it's important to have revenues. It's important to ensure that our stakeholders are happy, our clients are happy, that we mitigate all kinds of risk. Always remember, though, that at the center of all these things is your employee. It's people. And people needs to have wellness. Because imagine if your employees is not well, how will they function? And if they're not functioning to the utmost, then it would mean a great impact and loss to the organization. That's where I'm coming from. Now let's give an opportunity for our audience to ask questions. We're open to questions you might want to ask to Maha.
Or Darwin?
No questions.
Hi. I actually have a question for Maha. Sorry. Okay. My question is, how do you handle leaders in organizations where they have a skewed definition of resilience? In a way that resilience now becomes, if I can do this, so can you. So much that it leads to toxic positivity. How do you handle that?
Maha, would you like to take that?
I think that's such a. What's your name, please?
That's Ronaldel Ferentino, one of the hosts of the HR Cafe from the Philippines.
So what a powerful question, you know, and that's really the yin and yang, right? You know, it cannot be that resilience is equal to find a way to make it happen, you know. So I think that's such a great point. And there is so much that people processes and leadership role modeling comes to play in this, you know. Toxicity it's very important that toxicity does not get normalized, you know, and therefore a few things that we've used, we've had one or two such cases, back at work as well. So one is a little bit of a nudge and a soft coaching to the said leader to say, hey, you know, we know your intent may be good, but the way the recipient receives it is it's not okay to not be okay, you know. So literally saying it's okay to not be okay. And the CEO standing up in town halls, not only saying it's okay not to be okay, but sharing literally that I was not okay last week when something happened and I had to take some time off, you know. And I'm sharing this because we are a family. Really helped us normalize this. The second thing our CEO did is very clearly say, hey, 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, I'm actually not available because that's my gym time, you know. Again, normalizing, making time for physical wellness, you know. So I think a lot of times role modeling, and maybe I'm indexing on role modeling a little extra today, but I think it makes it possible for people to feel safe in being who they are and getting their full selves to work. talking about challenges, personal and professional. And then, using peer coaching, using a little bit of a nudge, and at times a formal 360 where needed, to help colleagues understand what resilience is not, is so important. What a great point and a great question.
May I also add something?
Yes.
I think it's, aside from what Maha has mentioned, I think what that particular leader should understand that every person is unique. Every person has his or her own unique way of coping, adapting, and resolving his or her own issues. And we cannot put every person in just one box. That's something that we need to understand. We need to, you cannot teach a fish to fly, or you cannot teach a bird to swim, right? So understanding the needs of the employee and the uniqueness of the employee is important. And that's a time where, if the leader understands that, that's a time you influence your leader to be able to have programs that will support the needs of the employees.
Great point.
Any other questions from the group?
I think he has one. May I request if you could also introduce yourself, at least names, so we know who's asking? Thanks.
No. How can I? Sorry. Hello. Okay. My name is Paul Herrera. I'm from Hyundai and also from the Philippines. I have a question though. Building organizational resilience, technically it's part of the culture of the organization, right? But then what we want to focus here would be how to build or focus more in terms of resiliency of the organization. And it really impacts culture. In a small companies, my question is, in a small companies, how can we help leaders to prepare, or how can we help the organization to prepare to focus more on resiliency? Especially we're coming from a pandemic. Thank you.
By starting with the why again. Why is it important to be resilient, right? I think that small or large organizations would need to understand the why on having organizational resilience. Because if your leaders don't understand that, where you're coming from and what's the impact to the organization of having organizational resilience, employee resilience, and cultural resilience, then we're at loss. I think providing, not only providing data or anecdotal stories of other organizations, but making the leader realize that as an HR leader, you and him has the same goal, to make sure that the organization becomes successful. And the organization can only be successful if, as Maha mentioned earlier, the foundations are there. And part of your foundations would be your people should be able and ready to be able to adapt and thrive in challenges or situations that the companies would have. Now, if your leader don't understand that, then I think there's a lot more coaching that would be happen between the leader, the HR leader, and,
No, absolutely.
and the CEO.
And what I really liked about what Darwin said is, the bit on striving, Each of us, there are days when we do what needs to be done. And there are some leaders and there are some situations where we want to go the extra mile, So helping leaders understand what makes an employee want to go that extra mile and what is the role they may want to play, so that people really want to, give their heart and soul, to make the agenda happen, is perhaps where the trick lies. I'm also a little amused at times by how people talk about organizational culture like it's something sitting there, Culture is what we create, And literally, it is not just the leaders who create the culture. Each one of us, do we eat lunches with only one set of people every day? Do we mix it up, Do we notice when someone who I sit with is kind of behaving a little differently? defines the experience culture by every colleague, So I would say each one of us has a role to play in shaping the culture of what's appreciated, what it is to work in this workplace, and what we don't want to create, And I think each of us can take that onus rather than externalizing it to the organization, the leadership, etc., etc.
Do we still have one more question? One time with one. Do we still have time to have one more question before we go to the most anticipated event of the day, which is lunch? Any more questions? Oh, yes, please. One last question before we go to lunch.
Is it okay already? Hello.
Yeah. Your name?
Hi, my name is Match and I'm from the Philippines. Question for both of you. In your respective organization, have you ever encountered exhausting every possible way of providing a wellness program, like a holistic approach? However, it came to a point wherein the participation had died down. What factors have you considered and how did you recalibrate or reevaluate the situation?
Can I answer that first? In my current organization, what we realize is during the pandemic, we strive to have virtual engagement programs. And yes, we were able to successfully launch a lot of engaging virtual activities. We've even used TikTok and a lot of things to engage our employees, even if they're working at the comfort of their homes, even if they're working far from the office or whatnot. But we realized that, yes, at certain point, it dies down. And we realized that our strength as an organization, and this is what our GM would always tell us and what our CHRO would always tell us, is the strength of our organization is being able to have person-to-person communication. That's the reason why when the government says that we have to go back, we made a decision that yes, for us to fully engage our population of employees, let's have them back to the office and let's have multiple engagement programs that would really revive the interest, because you know what, it's having a face-to-face discussion, having interpersonal engagement programs are really successful because people would again be will have an opportunity to touch base with friends, colleagues that they're really happy to be with, mentors that they look up to into the office, and oftentimes this is being forgotten during online or virtual presentations. But that's for me.
So I have a very divergent build and maybe one fact and one trick that I want to share. Okay. The first fact is, as we go through looking at well-being, it's very important to look at the well-being of the people function as well, or the HR function. Okay. And I would say don't take it so hard on yourself if a lot of things were tried and it didn't work. You just got to know so many ways it doesn't work, and there are many other things that we can learn. So one of the best ways for our own function is actually to stay connected with the fraternity and check what worked in your organization. Is there something we can learn? Platforms like this is an enabler, but even otherwise, taking care of our own teams, we shouldn't lose sight of that as we look at the broader enterprise, commercial teams, manufacturing teams. So that's a very, very important one that I would literally plead to us as a fraternity to say. In Mondelez, we say, put the oxygen mask on yourself first, okay? The second thing I would say, which is the trick, okay? We realized in Mondelez that the best way to make any initiative work is one word, which is co-create. Do not try and create any program in a room with a bunch of HR people or with only leaders. Take a diagonal cross-section of the organization, create shared accountability, and therefore agility over perfection. We cannot have one perfect process that we roll out. It has to be a few things we try, we are agile, we'll embrace it, but HR is not creating it. HR is enabling the creation of it. but employees are creating it. And when I am part of what is getting created, I make it succeed. That's a reality, you know. And if it's not successful, I will come and correct it. And therefore, shared accountability. So I would say if there is one thing I would really request you to take away, it is one, take care of the well-being and the resilience of your own teams and yourself, please. And secondly, co-opt not just leaders, but a lot of employees to co-create and co-own whatever we are trying to create. So that would be my little build.
Agree. And for our last words, HR and people leaders, we empower our people. We empower people to be successful, or we are the reasons why they are not successful in life. So we just have to make sure that we make the right decisions, not only for our companies, but also for our employees, because we are enablers. HRs and people leaders are enablers of success. So that's it. And thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Mahalakshmi of Mondelez International.
Thank you, and amazing meeting you, Darwin. And a big thanks to all of you. I mean, we are literally between you and lunch, and amazing listening and amazing participation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.